Hey everyone, I think that we're ready to go ahead and get started with the Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting for tonight. If staff will call the roll, please.
Stacy Gloss,
Here.
Morgan White,
Here.
Andrew Stump,
Here.
Tomas Delgado,
Here.
Grace Wilkin,
Here.
Jessica Lemkool, Luke Westalker.
Here.
Sorry.
Okay, excellent. We have a quorum. Let's see, I feel bad. I'm playing a little bit of catch up from not being present at the last meeting.
Stacy, I
Did
didn't.
the minutes
I
go
did not
out
get
for
them
the
attached.
last?
I'm sorry, so you
That's
don't
totally
have
fine.
minutes to approve tonight.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much. Next, are there any changes or additions to the agenda that the board would like to entertain?
Yes, there's a few things I wanted to share today. One was, there's two agenda items that I was hoping, one in new business and then one in addition to Scott's staff report, so. Wanted to get an update on the city's undeveloped parcels and any kind of long-term planning for them. And then bringing some ideas that community members have had expressed about utilizing those parcels. And then the new business was related to community events that are like in partnership with the SAC and possibly the Landscape Recycling Center, as well as Blue Stem Hall Nature School and Coop, Kids Owned and Operated Play. And I can elaborate on what those ideas are.
Can we,
Mhm.
well, I was going to say, I move to add those two agenda items that Tomas just suggested. Second? I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of adding these two agenda items, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you. I look forward to addressing these issues this evening. Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening is public input. Are there any members in the group present tonight that would like to address the board? All right, we'll go on and we will move into our staff report.
Good evening, Commission. We've got a reminder in the staff report that we're using the new City of Urbana email addresses for all board and commission work, all board and commission communications. So apologies if from time to time I still email your old email address, but we should all be working to keep all of those on the official email address so that it's all captured for records retention. Next, I have an update. The city had published, I think we had talked about this in a previous meeting, city had published a request for a proposal for a electric vehicle charging station vendor. And we received 2 responses, but really only 1 proposal. And we've selected that proposal from Blink Charging to move forward with some EV charging deployment. The Blink is applying for some grant funding that will be announced later this year, and so we're in a holding pattern until then. We've selected them to move forward with. We don't have a contract or an agreement with them at this time, so we don't have, locations selected, but it's really the locations are on the basis of where they think they can, get a lot of activity in terms of electric vehicle charging. So that's really in their space. And so there's nothing to do on this just yet, but I want to let you know that we are going to be moving forward with that following, news of whether they get the grant. The framework is that the vendor licenses space at city-owned parking lots, and the vendor installs, owns, operates, and decommissions the charging stations. So there's no cost to the city in that program. Taking questions or move on to the next one.
Is the idea that the EV charging stations will be on the like city-owned parking lots specifically? So more focused on the like central urban areas of Urbana, or are these going to be distributed more widely throughout the community?
So in the RFP, we shared all the property that we own and made that potentially available. You know, we'll have final sign off on where they go. You know, there may be some barrier at some particular property that they may be interested in, but we're not able to accommodate. We'll make a final cut. But we made available all the properties that we own because that's what we control. And from there, the vendor is, you know, narrowing down, and they're going to narrow down in the core of the city because they have to have a certain volume of charging that they are, you know, collecting fees for to justify the installation cost and make a profit.
Yes, Morgan, go ahead.
You said that there's no expected cost to the city. Is there any expected net revenue to the city
Potentially,
through the licensing agreements?
potentially we'll negotiate that when we, you know, get the results from the grant funding and get towards an agreement, a contract. Okay. Moving on, we are moving forward with a third year of the geothermal bulk purchase program, Geothermal Urbana-Champaign. We'll be working with the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois again. We're closing the RFP for installers this Friday, and from there we will move forward with selecting a vendor and scheduling educational events and moving forward. Essentially the exact same news for what is essentially the exact same program, Solar Urbana-Champaign, for installing solar arrays on homes and businesses. We'll be publishing, that timeline's a little bit later, we'll be publishing an RFP with our partner Midwest Renewable Energy Association soon and moving forward with that offering. And our second landfill solar development has secured a special use permit for that use on our closed landfill, on the city's closed landfill. And so the developer has already applied for an interconnection study with Ameren, and will be putting together and applying for incentives from the state of Illinois to develop a project there. And so we are in a holding pattern, just waiting for the results of that incentive program. If they're awarded an incentive, then we will move forward with converting a lease option into a long-term lease, and then they will build the project. Our next commission meeting would be March 7th at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the geothermal solar group buy or landfill project? I have one. How many years will the solar group buy? What year are you going into with that program?
I think this is going to be our 8th year.
Are we the longest running with MREA at this point?
As far as I know, we're the longest running in the country.
It's really exciting. Very cool.
I have a question. Do we have data points about that on a city website or on the Grow Solar Urbana-Champaign website or something like that? And similar for geothermal?
We collect data for the performance of the program in terms of leads, contracts, educated for each year. I'm not sure if it's published anywhere, but we have it. Certainly can share it.
Okay, thank you. Were we adding the piece about parcels or undeveloped parcels onto this part of the agenda?
Stacy, correct me, if this isn't allowed, but I thought we had, at one point had added a public input checkpoint kind of throughout the meeting in case any of the audience wanted to say something.
We haven't done that in a while. We've been just going with the format that we have. However, seeing that we have an audience here tonight, I wouldn't mind adding that in. Does anyone have any questions about any of the updates or comments about any of the updates that Mr. Tess provided this evening? Okay, we may check in again towards later in the meeting. Thank you for being here. Yeah, Tomas, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to get a sense if there was any kind of proposed developments for some of the undeveloped parcels that the city of Urbana owns and maintains currently. I know that the Wood Street parcel is currently being gardened by the Solidarity Gardens Group as well as Cunningham Township. And asking just because there's been some renewed interest by some of the community groups, naturalist groups, as well as the Solidarity Gardens folks and that network, as well as somewhat the CU Farm to School network, about the establishment of community food forest within Urbana. And there was some discussion around those parcels as being ideal sites for kind of micro agroforestry projects. Wanted to just get a sense if there was any kind of prioritization to offload those parcels, develop those parcels.
So the Wood Street parcel, my understanding is we're holding onto that for long-term Boneyard Creek Greenway redevelopment ambitions. So sometime in the future. In the interim, I think the city is happy with an interim use like a community garden. In terms of planting trees, we'd want to talk about that a little bit more. Once you plant a tree, people don't want to bulldoze that tree for redevelopment later on, so that could inhibit what would ultimately be the Greenway development plans. In terms of other parcels, the city had years ago bought a parcel on Glover Avenue across the street from Public Works. That was bought for future expansion of Public Works. Later, the city bought parcels on the same side, directly connected to existing Public Works parcels, and expanded in that direction instead, and decided that the parcels across the street on Glover were surplus. We have city council ordinance passed to auction those properties off. We did attempt to auction them once, and we had used a similar property as a valuation and set a minimum price based on that, and we didn't get any bids. We've since split that parcel into two pieces. We're finishing the recording of the plat, so that's not quite done yet. And we're gonna lower the minimum bid and re-auction it. So that's in an industrial district, and I suspect that there's gonna be some commercial or light industrial interested bidders. Other parcels, say downtown or around downtown, those the fates of those parcels are really being worked on by the Economic Development Division and other city leadership. So I can't comment on that.
Is it safe to assume that they may also adopt that auction process for some of those parcels, or?
They may pursue an auction, or they may pursue development agreements. I can't really say.
And if the public were to be interested in sort of getting a just spatial visualization of where these parcels exist, where would they go to check that out?
We have published for city council sometime in the last couple of years a listing. I don't know if there was a map, but there was a listing of all the parcels that the city owns. I can look up which city council meeting that was and where it's published. We have that available for anyone who's interested.
Got it too. I've found that while we're talking. I found the
it?
map and the list you sent me. So you sent me the nice list of properties, and I also got a map as well.
Excellent. Well, appreciate if you're able to share that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe send it to Scott to send to everyone, and I don't know if we want to add it. If there's people who are more widely interested, make it more publicly accessible. And I had some other questions or thoughts too, if I may. I was wondering also if it needs to be a whole separate lot or places that we already own, you know, like there's green space here around the city building, around the new fire stations that we're gonna construct. So also wondering if it needs to be like a separate small residential lot, or if we can also utilize the space we have, like Scott was saying, where we know we're gonna be, you know, permanently at this site for decades as far as we know. So planting a tree on this site might not be as big of a deal as a residential empty lot.
Yeah, I think there's kind of competing motivations amongst the stakeholders involved. There's CU Farm to School that's interested in like establishing some sort of like a school community food forest on a school site, or adjacent to a school site. This idea also appealed to that group because it could possibly be planned for these parcels to kind of mirror the safe routes to school in certain areas, creating kind of like a food trail for you know, student populations. There's a whole, I guess, naturalist group here in Urbana who frankly would appreciate a food forest anywhere. So if it would be here on the city's campus here, that'd be, you know, great. And then, yeah, there was just some renewed interest about possibly utilizing those parcels because they're not being used right now. As far as I know, they're maintained, but only to a point to, you know, not allow for like wild invasives to grow, and there could be some potential to, you know, to reverse kind of that damage that's been done there. Also, places that are accessible to the public safely. Obviously not ones that are attracting folks to, you know, go into an industrial park or places like that. So, yeah, just some interest in getting a sense of where these parcels exist and which ones would be ideal for some of the ideas from those groups.
Yeah, that sounds like very exciting stuff. I think, yeah, and along the school routes and stuff sounds like a really great idea. If some other thoughts might be helpful to talk to, we have a tree commission, right? They might be an interesting other commission avenue. And maybe some with the U of I with the sustainable farm. I had a friend in particular who was growing native shrubbery, permaculture things. And as far as, I think, my understanding of what seems like kind of the city's overall strategy with some empty lots has been, as Scott said, kind of offloading some for other purposes, and then also turning a lot into housing developments. We have Habitat for Humanity that vitalizes a lot of these empty residential lots. And then also First Followers is another registered group, and they use that for part of their workforce training for young people. And then those houses become affordable rate houses in the area. So I think that it's a wonderful idea. I think that there was also lots of things in progress so that we don't have just lots of city-owned vacant lots around, but there's still definitely some, and I think that's exciting possibilities.
Tomas, I'm part of a group on campus that's like part of the Illinois Climate Action Planning Committees. I'm on the Resilience Committee. And one of the resilience goals for campus that has to do with the urbanized areas of Champaign-Urbana and Savoy as well is a biodiversity master plan. There is a student, Gabe Harper Hagen, who's been working on the biodiversity master plan. And in one of our meetings a couple weeks ago, the idea of these food forests or food pathways came up in the meeting. And I'd really like to make the connection to sort of, I don't know exactly what that connection is right now, but make the connection to the biodiversity master plan that this is one way that we're thinking about, you know, green infrastructure, or thinking about diversifying our landscapes.
That sounds great, thank you.
Any other thoughts on this? No? Cool. Great. Thank you for bringing it up to our attention this evening. And feel free to get in touch. All right. So from the last meetings, I think that what we're going to do is have the resolution brought up onto the screen, or for continuing the discussion around plastic carryout bags in the community.
What I've pulled up here is the strike through and underline with the full markup. I've compiled the recommendations that were sent to me from members, and I made a few of my own. Mostly they consist of using the word carry out instead of single use. If you take a grocery bag home and then reuse it again for something else, I guess it's not single use anymore. Carry out was in the language of the proposed state statute that did not move forward. And I also made some edits to one of the whereases to clarify the citation. And then I also clarified a reference to the establishment of the council goals. I just was a little more explicit with that.
And I was wondering if you got any other feedback, or if anyone had thoughts that they thought about since our last meeting but didn't have a chance to get in writing that wanted to be added.
I have a question. And I wasn't here for that meeting, but are we intending that this would be just for plastic carryout bags? Because it doesn't really specify that, and I don't know what the commission members were thinking. I personally think that the plastic carryout bags are so much worse than the paper carryout bags that it was my assumption as I was reading the whole thing, but looking at it now, I just don't see that we have said specifically one or the other. Was that discussed?
Yeah, I think there was discussion that depending on the harm that you're measuring, one is worse and the other is worse. That sound familiar?
Yeah, so I think we definitely talked about this. Tyler, one of the students we were working with, was, an advocate for making it be not just plastic, but all disposable bags, or carry out, however we want to call them. I think that also, there's also kind of the talk that we didn't want to be too limiting, because this is not an ordinance in itself right now. Like, there's a lot more work to get to that point, that this is like the first recommendation to council, to direct staff, likely Scott, to do even more work before we get to that point. So I think that we were also thinking in the lines of leaving it open to the possibilities to do a more in-depth analysis. What are the environmental impacts or other implications of paper versus plastic? And do we want to go with both? Or, I'd settle for at least plastic.
I have a question about the term carryout. I do see that it's used here several times, and I wonder if carryout does sort of connote or confer the meaning that we mean disposable plastics that aren't being recycled, or, or does carryout just mean any bag from any establishment that is packing something up for you?
So, you used the phrase, other than carry out, what was the other euphemism?
I guess
you used?
disposable plastics.
So, that gets back to, if you ever dispose of it, then I guess it's disposable, but all the bags you're carrying out. I think that's maybe the distinction. And then your other question,
I don't know if I couched it as a couple of questions or not.
oh, I think I was just going to mention, there is you mentioned, everywhere, at every store. There is, just looking at some of the other ordinances in the state, there are some, I think, square footage limits that most people have. I'm looking at a table I have on a document. So there's a 7,000 square foot, a 5,000 square foot, and a 5,000 square foot that I've made note of.
Is that in terms of like the establishment size?
Exactly.
For who would be affected by this? 'Cause
Exactly.
I'm sort of wondering about scale as well. I mean, I know that this is a resolution that's saying to direct staff to review, so sort of directing staff to sort of conduct a study. At least that's what it sounds like. And then to evaluate, I guess, what different options and the different economics that go into this program.
I would say we're not going to do, a university scale peer-reviewed scientific paper in terms of research. I like to use the term literature review. So, I've started to look at the ordinances of other cities and compile, for instance, what do they all decide on in terms of square footage? What language do they use? There's checkout bag, single use, and carry out bag, and then what the rate is of the fee that they're having collected at the checkout. And so there's 7 cents, 10 cents, 10 cents, and 10 cents.
Maybe what I think is interesting about what that research is that it sort of seems at like a larger scale building, so sort of like a larger either retail facility, grocery store. I would also be curious about restaurants, the inclusion of restaurants and sort of takeout food and, even possibly food trucks.
I think I think it makes sense to presume that what others were intending was to impact grocery stores.
So I'm looking at some definitions on a city in California, and how they define it is a single-use plastic carryout bag, any plastic bag provided at the check stand, cash register, point of sale, or other point of departure for the purpose of transporting food or merchandise out of the establishment. So I think other cities might include it more for beyond grocery stores, but I think that would be something that the city council would have to define.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be defined somewhere along the way somehow. And I think that the words at this point, I don't want to get too hung up on which word we're using. I think that, I think carry out can have some issues and not as clear as, single use, disposable, like you said, at checkout or point of sale kind of bag, that it's what we're getting at is, when you're at the cash register, you have your paper or plastic bags. And I think with carry out, because it's what if you bring previous plastic shopping bags in with you and reuse those, those wouldn't be taxed, or you bring in your cloth reusable bags, or you already paid for $1 for a reusable bag at checkout. That's where you are talking about those single-use disposable bags, and that just seems like carry out is a much broader category. So I think that there's still some things to be defined in there later on.
The good news is, I've got 4 different cities in Illinois that have ordinances to review, and so we can look at it, when we get there, we can look at all of their definitions of how they narrow it down or open it up, and use that language and change it if we need to. So
I'd like to propose that in this resolution, we say single-use carryout. And we can, the plastic or paper and other things can be something that's just left. But just to clarify, so we're all on the same page about what he's going to be focused on.
I would second and be in favor with calling it single-use carryout.
I also agree, and I'm just wondering, to propose it by saying, not to change every single term carry out here because it's simple, but I do wonder if we can add a whereas that just simply defines the meeting, and then not work on that too much further in order to be able to move through and move to a vote on this resolution.
Yep, I agree. And I think also along the way, like when I think what I recall of reading Chicago's resources about their bag fee online, they have, pages of definitions where they lay out exactly what do they mean disposable bag carryout. And I think that they even did include that for restaurants and takeout food. It was like all ones. But they specified like not the ones you put like produce in if you want that plastic bag, but the main point of sale or restaurants. But they have nitty gritties and all the like pages of definitions that I think that we'll probably have to do eventually, but we can narrow in those definitions when we get there. But I'm in favor of calling it single-use carry-out bags or some kind of footnote in there, kind of clarifying a little more what we're intending in this round.
Are there any other questions or concerns about the resolution as edited currently?
I know what EBT is, but I don't know what it stands for, so maybe we should spell that out. Also, I noticed that, we took out the tax and just said bag fee. It looks like there's one more to take out in section 4. One more section to take it out of. There's 2 in that section.
Yeah, there's a fee/tax and then a tax/fee. Twice. And section 2. Okay.
Yeah, that was another element that I collected out of the 4 cities that I've reviewed. One is tax and the other 3 are fee. And the one that's tax is Chicago, and Chicago is different in the state of Illinois in that so many state laws apply to the whole state but exempt Chicago, and they do a lot of things on their own, so it's worth considering.
Is there a difference in terms of how the funds are handled if it's called a fee or a tax?
I think there are some legal implications for which one you use.
I like the addition of including bags made from recycled materials or, it's all made from made of recyclable materials too, right? And so I don't know if we want to or maybe down the road, get down to clarifying that. I was doing just a quick internet search and it looks like it's really hard to find ones of recyclable materials and much easier from recycled materials. That it's like, a cotton fiber and that give or take, might be more recyclable, but might be from more, virgin natural resources versus ones made of old plastic bottles, but the bag might not be recyclable when you're done with it, but it's going to last forever being made of old plastic bottles. So I don't know if we want to, just put, made of recyclable materials and or recyclable. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm getting at.
Which section was that? I'm sorry.
4 and 5. So 4 talks about providing free, durable, reusable bags made of recyclable materials. So it sounds like when you're done with the bag, you can recycle it. And section 5 says from reusable bags made from recycled materials, like old plastic bottles, but it might not be recyclable.
Yeah, that was my addition, section 5. But I see that point. Recycle versus recyclable.
The one can simply add and recyclable after recycled.
So I noticed there is a store, I won't say which or where, but they're using their plastic bags, say or promote they're made from ocean plastics, for example. So I think that those are recycled. They have been recycled from ocean plastics into those bags. Scott, are you making some of these edits in real time?
Haven't been, I've just been taking notes.
Okay, my next, I guess, I wasn't at the last meeting. Was this resolution presented publicly in the last meeting? Okay, so we can vote on it here tonight. It doesn't have to come up for you know, another reading or something like that at a next meeting. Great. If there's no other questions, I'd like someone to make a motion to approve.
Can we clarify first, because we've had some changes already, or I'm just reading Scott's notes of, because it seems like this with some amendments, right?
The notes I've made is use the longer phrase, single-use carryout, spell out EBT, remove tax, and in sections 4 and 5, use the phrase recycled and recyclable.
And I think for that one, just a little thing, maybe like or as much as possible. I just feel like that's a hard one because the ones made from the recycled ocean plastic are probably going to be a mixed plastic fiber that's not recyclable. I feel like you kind of have to get one or the other unless we can find both, and just kind of weighing that there's two avenues of looking at it.
Yeah, and/or recyclable.
Thank you.
Yeah, was to not use virgin materials. That's for a study I was quoting. They were saying that it's more energy to make a cotton bag.
Would it make sense for, in section 3's recommendation, which basically is just touching on exploring like ways that the fees could be utilized for, you know, sustainability-related efforts, would it make sense to maybe just strongly recommend that those fees be used to fund equitable transition to the carryout bags that are in discussion right now?
I'm in favor of that. I think that's kind of the ideas I had in my mind, or it might be an upfront thing, you know, like we buy City of Urbana logoed bags on recycled, you know, bags by the hundreds and sell or give them out in key places, and then use some of that fee revenue for that. So I think either way, I think we can definitely spell it out. That's kind of what I had envisioned we would get to at some point.
I don't quite understand if you're saying to only use it for that purpose or to include that purpose in the use.
Well,
Of the
what I'm
money.
really saying is that we should probably provide like real recommendations on how the fee should be utilized, in addition to using it for transitioning to carry out bags that are reusable. But it seems like other municipalities and counties have used those fees to fund environmental education, other things that,
So,
kind of broad reasons like that. So maybe there's an opportunity to be more specific on what those fees can be used for.
yes, I get that. Okay. I do think, just thinking more about that section, that the word revolving fund may not apply. The way green revolving funds work is usually there's a financial payback. So maybe it should just say a green fund. And then it could say, when it says to invest in other sustainability related efforts, it could say to support the needs of this program or this initiative and other sustainability efforts. And it's explore, you know, and identify other sustainability efforts or something, you know, the follow-up work could really dig into some of those things.
I support that change, and without getting too far down the road of being prescriptive in the resolution about what sorts of items or programming that the funds would be spent on. I think there's, you know, certainly two sides. There's the hurdle of creating a program in the first place and then being able to answer the question, and being prepared to answer the question, well, what are you going to spend these funds on? And how will you? And I'm sure that this, you know, commission would like to provide some input on that, and certainly agree with you, Thomas, about the equitable transitions to, you know, equitable transitions within this program itself, as well as equitable transition in other programs or in other sustainability-related programs in our community.
Jess was mentioning remotely about plant-based alternative plastics. I don't know if she was getting at kind of corn plastics or some algae-based plastics, I don't know. But I think when we get into the definitions, that could be another one of like, if we encourage environmentally friendly reusable bags and maybe what those different options could be underneath it.
I'd like to move that the resolution as edited or as expected to be edited be completed and submitted on behalf of the SAC to the city.
Second.
You need to change seats to call the roll.
I don't know if you need a
Since
roll.
it's a resolution, I don't know if we need a roll call or
Want
not.
me- If you want me to call the roll, I'll call the roll.
Can you
Um,
call the roll here, just because I would really hate to have the clerk say, well, you didn't call the roll in this meeting and now we have to do it more officially at the next meeting, just in case. Thank you.
Stacy Gloss,
I support this.
Morgan White,
Yes.
Andrew Stump,
Yes.
Tomas Delgado,
Yes.
Grace Wilkin,
Yes.
Luke Westalker.
Yes.
May I ask a wrap-up kind of question now that that's passed to on next steps is, I imagine that edited version, it'll take to council with a memo and things. And I think then we had talked about, I think it'd be great if we had a version that was like ready to go for city council to pass to. Like, I feel like we can take this and just change the now therefore the city council directs the mayor instead of SAC advises council to direct the mayor, blah, blah, blah. I think that would get the ball rolling much more quickly if it was, here's the recommendation and here's a resolution we're bringing for you to pass now. And I'd be happy to help with wording stuff, but I think that's going to be the most effective route because I think it could be easy to kind of just take the recommendation and then not actually like pass it and do it. And it would be so easy to just change a few words and pass it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Yep, and then this version too, it does need to have included on the bottom, the like passed on which date and signature. So I will, when the version is edited and complete, I'll go ahead and I'll sign that for submission. Get back to the agenda, if I can find it. Okay, we'll move into new business. Tomas, you brought up sustainability planning or event planning.
Yeah, one, I wanted to get a sense if there's any budget for the sustainability program to put on events involving SAC as sort of community touch points, similar to the landscape recycling event where there was a pumpkin smash. Are those sorts of events sort of easy to put together in involvement with your division? Does it require budgeting to do those?
So the cash available for sustainability programming, aside from, the U-Cycle budget, is about something like $1,500 a year. So that's what we're working with. When we do events with MREA, with the bulk solar program, with the bulk geo program, we're actually leveraging fees collected by the by those associations from the installers. So the installers and ultimately the participants are paying whatever costs there are there. But low cost, no cost things, those are possible.
Asking because there was some interest from the Blue Stem Hall Nature School Board, which is a nature school and experiential learning preschool in southern Urbana, to host an event in partnership maybe with Kids Owned and Operated Play, which is like a nonprofit that creates pop-up playgrounds with an approved list of recyclable items for kids to play and manipulate with. Hosting an event like that at the Blue Stem campus in partnership with the Landscape Recycling Center, families could be encouraged to bring recyclable items for their kids to play and manipulate, and there'd be some sort of a process of getting those items to the Landscape Recycling Center or wherever they'd be suitable to go. Yeah. Wanted to maybe just talk about, not necessarily feasibility of it, but whether or not SAC would be sort of open to be part of something like that.
Well, if SAC is interested, that's for you all to discuss. In terms of what the city might be able to do, we can certainly talk about that at another time.
I appreciate you bringing it up. I think it sounds like interesting ideas. I'm always down for whatever events we can do. I would just chime in a little bit as far as the Pumpkin Smash event went. As far as I know, there were no city funds that went into that. Scott printed a few paper flyers for us. Yeah, my understanding is that SAC, we don't have a budget or a flyer or logo or those things, which would be awesome to get those. But so that event was essentially free. I don't think we had hardly any cost. Like I said, a few pieces of paper we printed. I just made flyers on Canva. I think that it was relatively not a big deal to do. That was kind of, I kind of took lead on it of people ideas. I think Stacy even mentioned it last year and others. We partnered with the Champaign County Environmental Stewards, and they were also very helpful in some supplies and stuff like that, just giving out candy and things, which are optional. We could have done it for absolutely free, but if we want to give out candy and we want to have flyers and those things, so I think that there's definitely possibilities, just a matter of doing it, and I'm interested in supporting that in however way we can.
Great. Yeah, I was thinking about just that as an additional touch point for the SAC with community members, also involving the Landscape Recycling Center. So yeah, definitely within the vein of how the Pumpkin Smash event.
So I think when we're talking about doing an event, the majority of effort before the event happens is where the ideas, it tends to take more than the initial thought. People don't think how much it actually ends up taking in terms of coordinating the event, finding the people, establishing the location and the time and the process. It's all very straightforward, but it takes time. And I think that, so my perspective is that we should, as SAC, that we should encourage events, but we should also encourage the event suggesters to find a primary lead that is not one of the SAC members leading the coordination of the event. So like the Champaign County Environmental Stewards, you said that Champaign was involved as well, helped with that Pumpkin Smash, and there are lots of opportunities for events, and I think if we could get the community members who want to work with us to already have, who's going to do the majority of that organizational, the logistical stuff that has to happen, and then we can, in my opinion, then we can participate, try to attend, help spread the word, and have if there's enough time ahead of the event, we could have a agenda item here where someone comes and talks about it, and we talk about all the benefits and really, consider who else to tell. And then afterwards, we could have them come back and talk about how it went and sort of lessons learned. And it could be really a great cycle to really support more sustainability linked events throughout our town. So I really love the idea, but I want to be cautious about what we add to our, what we as SAC members are doing, or what we're asking the city staff to support.
Yeah, certainly. I wouldn't say that this type of event would call on any kind of additional time or labor from SAC. I serve on that school's board, so it would be me doing most of that convening as well as the rest of the board. They already would be providing the venue and most of the coordination efforts. I was just asking about like sort of how, if there is a process of SAC being sort of named on the bill of being, part of an event like that. And, yeah, if there's some discussion around the logistics of getting those recycled items to the Landscape Recycling Center, which is why I was asking Scott about budgeting for events. But in terms of you all being part of it, there really wouldn't be any sort of ask for coordination or effort from you all. It would just be come visit. So.
I mean, I certainly support having kind of the Sustainability Advisory Commission lend its name to sustainability and recycling education in the community for kids. So that sounds like a really good fit and a good way to let people know that there is a sustainability commission within Urbana and that, you could check us out and kind of see what we do. Maybe if we say that we're a partner on that event, I don't know if it's part of the flyer that just, include a website to the SAC Commission or the work that Urbana is doing on sustainability. But again, this sounds like a pretty low lift.
Yeah.
I'm happy to donate some recyclables.
Great. Thanks.
Curious about how we get a logo, because I feel like that was also my thing with past events was, it's like, sure, we would put SA's thing on there if we had a logo. On the printed ones we can, but it's not as nice for like the visuals. So I don't know the process. Do we go through like a city marketing? Do we have a marketing department or PR that like approves or makes logos or something?
We have a communication specialist. I don't think there are no board or commission logos that I know of. That's a consideration. I mean, you could use the city logo with Sustainability Advisory Commission next to it.
We could have a competition for a image that would be our 5-year imagery logo that is representative of sustainability in the city of Urbana. And that would be a picture that we repeat on various flyers as opposed to defining something as a logo.
There's sort of like a sustainable Urbana something, isn't there? I'm not calling it a logo. It's the Sustainable Urbana like Facebook
Not that's been
page?
used in 10 years.
Oh, okay. Can we revive it?
I think we should consider carefully creating a multiplicity of logos for the city.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
We already have
That's
a
fair.
number of different brandings. We have the city, we have LRC, we've got Imagine Urbana. We got the market at the square.
I like the idea of the city one and just adding, Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission, and for all the commissions, if they want all the commissions to have it, like I could mess around with just like, a little text box, but like, to match the font and the color and all the stuff just right. There's probably Bridget or some professional who has a better way to do that.
I'd be happy to reach out to the communications director for the city to inquire. Okay. Are there any other events that folks wanted to bring up?
I did have one more.
Yeah.
Years ago, in 2019, before the pandemic, there was an effort to put together a food summit for the county, convening food systems professionals, food access professionals, and activists, and really just convening, Champaign County's food systems folks. That effort's been revitalized by the Champaign County Public Health Department, and convening a few community members, me being one of them. There's now a name for it. It's going to be Feeding Champaign County, and it's going to be a discussion addressing food access and security within the county. The date that we have slated for it is Tuesday, April 18th this year. And promotional materials and things like that are, forthcoming, but just wanted to just share that with you all.
I know that there are many students and some student organizations that are really interested in food access and food justice in particular. Could they be also invited to this event to participate?
Sure. Yeah, the event's going to be held at City View on downtown Champaign at the Illinois Terminal. And capacity is pretty high there, so we should be able to accommodate a number of people. But yeah, feel free to share any kind of invite list that you think should be part of it.
Is there a registration fee?
No, this will be free. But I think it will be formatted in a way that's more invitation only. I kind of feel weird saying that, but invite only, I guess. So.
Do you have a time on that, or is that still to be determined,
from
or?
like 9 to 4.
Oh, all day?
Somewhere around there, all day. Mhm.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Tomas, do you expect that to be focused on access to food and food security as the priority, or will it also involve food waste reduction? Although food waste reduction kind of ties to food access, so maybe it's a moot point, or maybe it's,
Yeah,
maybe
I
you
don't-
can't separate them.
Yeah, I don't think the themes necessarily will be entirely like dictated by the organizers. Our hope is that we're just convening siloed folks amongst our food system to talk about sort of the challenges that they face within their roles, as well as to talk about broadly food access in the county and food security in the
So-
county. So farmers, extension folks, food distributors, yeah. Mhm.
And are you already working with someone on campus about who to connect with in the whole food industry, food research world?
Yeah, so this is partly funded by the campus. So they'll be providing some just financial support and I believe other sort of resource sharing as well, so.
Great. So can we have SAC on that as well, since you're our rep in that group?
As long as we get a logo.
We need a logo for
Yeah.
the t-shirts,
Right.
the plastic bottle recycled t-shirts.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that that's another great opportunity, and thank you for sharing that. I definitely support that personally, and as the SAC role, I think it's great to, network and advertise, partner as much as we can as an organization. Also, just wanting to be realistic and considerate of our contribution too, like slapping our name on it, like, Tomas is a pivotal part of it for sure. But yeah, just other events that it's like, our partners did this much, and we kind of like said one little thing. And so anyway, just thinking about having a meaningful contribution too when we put our names as contributors.
Good deal. Thank you for bringing those events to our attention. Did you have a third? Okay. Are there any announcements this evening? It's going twice. All right. Well, with that, I don't believe we have any other business for the commission this evening, so I will see everybody in March. Thank you for attending.